Hello and welcome to the Porcelain Don channel. And this is my spoiler discussion for Deadhouse Gates. Hello and welcome to the Porcelain Don channel. As I said, this is my spoiler-filled discussion of the second book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen series, Deadhouse Gates. If you haven't read the book, get out of this video because I will be going through stuff that you don't want to hear, or I'd prefer not to be the one to tell you at least. So go and check it out, read it quickly, come back, and enjoy the video. Anyway, there's so much going on in this book. Right from the start, with the, in Anta, I believe it is, with the, when Felisin and Boarding are waiting to be, do the sort of walk of shame, if you will, a very extreme walk of shame, and there's the priest who's just made of flies, and there's so much going on. There's so deeply written and so evocative in its imagery that you're in it and you're in awe of what's going on, but you have no idea really of what's going on. That was my experience, at least. Maybe I'm stupid. It's possible, but I really enjoyed it. I was like, oh, this is amazing. I must fly on the wall, no pun intended, of something I don't understand, but clearly something important. But even just from there, it was just so, like, the whole book was so rich. And I'm going to be going through the different plot strands. Rather than going through the book chronology, I'm going to go through each plot strand, pointing out bits that I wish to talk about, just so I can keep it straight in my head, because there's so much going on. So we'll start, like we started here with Felisin, Heberic, Bourdin. I'm pretty sure it's Bourdin. It's a French name and it's pronounced Bourdin, but I don't want to be that guy. And I'm not sure if they have French pronunciations, so I'm going to call him Bourdin. And if I sound like a moron, that's why. But anyway, it's Bourdin for this story. So Bourdin, all great characters. They all have uh, they all have a very engaging arc. Felicin, for example, horrible things happen to her throughout the whole book, from the beginning to the end, even at the end when she becomes uh, who she becomes. Um, it's You're not sure that's great either. It's just awful thing after awful thing after awful thing, and it makes her fundamentally unlikable. At least, like, she becomes an awful person. She treats those around her awfully. She does awful things, but if those things happen to me, I would be way worse. So you understand. And I was curious, like, she's an unlikable character, but does that make me unempathetic, or do I lack compassion to find her as an unlikable character, even though I feel so bad for what's happened to her? But it's really well done because it's not over the top. It's quite subtle in how she acts. But yeah, it's that whole part is just dark and awful. And then you have Borden, who's trying to protect her, who's awesome, kind of like Kalam. He gives me a lot of Kalam vibes in the first one, sort of a big, burly guy that has no fear and just gets things done. Gives me that sort of vibe. Kalam was a claw, and I think Borden was a talon, which, bird feet. Um, Bird Feet Brotherhood. I'm not fully, like, they give you subtle hints about what that means, but I'm not fully abreast of the whole depth of those two organizations yet. But there is a lot of overlap between the two, and I think Borden has more, even though he seems like he doesn't fight he's not in the army, he doesn't seem to have a code or everything, but Borden seems emotionally the softer of the two. He seems the one with more heart, at least from what we see so far. No slight on Kalam, it's just that between these two guys, with a lot of similarities. The Borden strangely seems the one, yeah, that has a softer side. And he dies in a most brutal fashion, and you feel terrible, like Culp, Culp, yeah, Culp also dies at the exact same time in an even more brutal fashion. But I remember reading that, and I remember thinking, why him? Why Borden? Because Felison's kind of a jerk. She's just been suffering her whole life. Heberick is kind of a jerk too, a little bit, suffering for a long time. Borden also, I guess they have that in common, suffering, seems to have been suffering a long time, but he was my favorite out of the group. He was the one I most enjoyed. Maybe just because I enjoy reading about people slipping about in the dark and snapping people's necks when they, I don't want to say deserve it, when they do terrible things, when they feel like they deserve it. But I really liked him as a character. I like the depth of all the characters. Heberick is a very interesting and I feel like original character. I've read quite a lot of fantasy, and there's the Borden archetype of a bruiser who's very capable, etc. This Felisin, sort of a traumatized, injured young woman that lashes out. Like these have all been done many times, done very well here. Don't get me wrong, done very well. But I feel like Heberick. Yes, he is the sort of disillusioned scholar, but it's been nuanced in such a way that I don't know if I've seen its like, and it's so well done. Again, I don't find Heberick a very likable character. I find him, I love him in the way that he's written. I love the depth of him and uh, all the attributes and the way he interacts. I love that he's in the story. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a great character, but I don't find him likable. He's not one that I'm particularly rooting for, and I like to root for characters. But strangely, this doesn't make me struggle to read his parts. Like for example, when you look at other books, the most glaring example is Game of Thrones. If it's characters that you don't really like, uh, when you're reading their point of view, at least for me, it kind of felt like a chore because it's like I'm not interested in what you're doing. I'm not interested in this and that and that. And then I was waiting to get back to the characters who I do like, who I am invested in. So I was invested in Heberick without liking him and without wishing to see bad come to him, which was a credit and a testament to the writing of Steven Erikson. He's done a very good job with his characters. You can tell that he cares. You can tell that he cares about his characters because even the bad ones, the ostensibly bad, but in brackets, it's very nuanced, but even the ones that are evil or close to evil or on the evil side of the spectrum, because in malazan there seems to be no black and white thus far. There's some close, but nothing seems to be exactly black and white. Even the very bad ones, or even, like I said in the original spoiler-free review, even sort of tertiary level characters that don't really have any great impact on the plot. They're just sort of there to be foils for the main character or tertiary characters to react with to show us something. Even these characters are handled with such care and kid gloves, if you will. They're given the due respect their part in the book deserves. They're given the depth that their part in the book deserves. No one is poorly handled, and I think Erikson shows masterful work. So I think this strand was the least engaging for me, just because I didn't really care what happened to Felsen because I wasn't attached to her. I found her unlikable, but I wanted to find out, and why I said this is the strand I disliked. I loved all of this book, so it's not like I was trying to get away, but this was the weakest one, and I still loved it. So that tells you how much I feel about it. The next strand, in terms of weakness, I shouldn't use that. The next strand that I enjoyed less, but I still enjoyed greatly, was the Bridge Burners strand that had Kalam, Fiddler, Crocus, and Aspelar. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Aspelar, formerly Sorry. And they're going to try and take Aspelar home, but they're going sort of a circuitous route. Calam's got some kind of job that he wants to do, which we find out is, something else quite important. And this part was good because it gave these characters, it took them out of the element that we're familiar with. It took them out of the element of the bridge burners, or in Crocus's case, the Rujistan or the Phoenix Inn, the Rujistan, his local friends, thieves, or his uncle, or whatever. It takes you out of that, and it allows you to show more depth to the character because it shows them in an unfamiliar setting, unfamiliar for them, sort of, even though the bridge burners have been in Seven Cities previously, and we do find out about that. And Callum is originally from Seven Cities, but you do see a more. You do see them out of their elements. You do see more depth to them. You see Crocus as a boyfriend type. You see him as a guardian type, how he acts in these roles. You see Callum as a guardian type. You see Fiddler as sort of a paternal figure, and as a guardian type also. You see these different things that add more layers, more strings to their bow. And as a character, I really come to appreciate Fiddler in this book. He's really, really well handled. I think he's by far the best out of these groups. Oh, except Iskarol Pust. Iskarol Pust is a priest of shadow that you see in this book who is completely mad. And he tries to befuddle and discombobulate the people he's verbally sparring with through radical honesty. He tries to tell the truth and hide the truth in more truth, so people will seem confused. We'll get confused by what he's saying and think he's mad and not take him seriously. And it's exactly like Krupp from the first book, but the opposite side of the coin. Krupp will try to discombobulate you and entangle you with flowery phrases and misdirection and everything like that. And Pust is much more brutal, blunt force trauma. He will say what he says, but he will talk to himself. He will say the exact truth that he's thinking, to throw you off the scent. And people think, does he mean what he's saying? Does he know what he's saying? Is he mad? I think that's brilliant. I think it's much more of an original piece of character work than Krupp. Even though Krupp is great, I did find him a little bit annoying, but in a good way. But I think Iskarol Pust is much more original and much more fun. It seems more fun to write, but it's definitely more fun to read. And the way he confounds and frustrates the characters around him, I found that really, really enjoyable, and I hope he's in it more. But yeah, this whole arc was, this whole story, this whole narrative thread was really, really great. Not so invested in Aspelar and Crocus. Nothing against them, but they weren't my priority. But seeing Seven Cities through their eyes as newcomers was very interesting, and also seeing the evolution of Fiddler to a sort of guardian, as I said, paternal figure for these, was really rewarding, because he's a really well-written character. He's a really lovable character. You really care about him. So yeah, this was a really enjoyable thread. The next thread that was confusing but enjoyable was Icarium. Icarium and Mappo Trell, or Mappo Runt the Trell. So well written, so confusing. It seems like it's off in its own different story. It's a man that has a wound in his mind, where if he loses his temper, he can ostensibly destroy everything. He can destroy everything that he has in reach, and it seems like no one can stop him. Maybe Rake, Anamanda Rake, that we saw from the first book, who has divine level power, or maybe there's certain people that have the capacity to stop him, but it really doesn't seem like anyone. The chances of anyone being in range to stop him if he loses his temper seem to be quite slim. And it's such an interesting addition, such an interesting choice to put this character in. I'm really interested to see where this goes, because he interacts with certain members of the book, certain narrative threads of the book, but not in a way that's irremovable. So it's almost superficial interactions, and it's like Chekhov's gun. Why would you put in a character that can destroy everything if he's not held in check? And it's been proven that he can easily lose his temper. He doesn't have mastery of it, and Mapo sometimes doesn't have the capacity to control him. So why would you put this ticking time bomb if it's not going to explode in the future? So it is. So it makes you think that it is going to explode in the future, but why? What purpose is Ikariam's anger going to play in the future? I can't see what. I'm not going to project. I'm not going to try and project. I'm not going to play the guessing game. I have a few ideas, but I feel like my ideas are somewhat cheap, and I feel like whatever Steven Erikson does will be not cheap. So I'm not going to sully that with telling you my ideas, but I feel like he's going to do better than what I think he's going to do. I have the utmost confidence in him of being able to pull it off well, but it's obvious it's there for a reason. He's sowing the seeds now for something in the future, because there's no need for Ikariam to be in this book. Not that there's no need for him to not be in the book. It's just, in my experience, people don't add things in that don't add anything. Writing is a hard job. You're not going to waste your time for no reason. So I'm eagerly waiting to see, because this was just it was so bittersweet and so tenderly handled, and it was the dichotomy of the man who has unbelievable power and unbelievable rage and has killed and destroyed so many and so much, but he's so wistful and sweet and almost baby-like in the sense that he has this unquenchable hope, it seems like, at least at the first part of his arc here. And it breaks your heart even though you know almost nothing about the story. It's so well done. Erikson really is a master, and this book is really well done. And then after that we have The Chain of Dogs, I believe. I don't think I'm missing anything. There is Shaikh, but that doesn't seem to be a story in and of itself. It sort of dips in and out of other stories, and there's nothing there spoiler-free that I don't want to really talk about. But yeah, The Chain of Dogs is, I would say, the principal narrative thread. And it's so amazingly done. It's so heartbreaking, Let's start from the beginning. It just seems like there's a rebellion, there's a retreat, then they get across here. It's a military marching story, campfires, battle, campfires, battle, campfires, battle, food, water, logistics, things like that. And that can drain a reader. If that's not what you're looking for, if you're looking for a fantasy book, a traditional fantasy book, or a swashbuckling epic or something like that, that can drain a reader, because it is the same thing. Even if you spice it up with battles, it is quite monotonous, and you do get into this sort of trudging effect of reading. But it's handled so well here, and it's so wrought with emotion, and the characters are so vividly realized. Duika is historian, excellently written. Bult, Sormo Enath, Nil Nether, Coltane, they're just so well written and so well realized. Nobody is over the top. Nobody is undercooked. I don't want to say it's perfection, because you'll feel like I've drunk the Kool-Aid, but it's just so perfectly balanced, at least for me, because reading is very subjective. So I can't say somebody's not going to read this and get bored, or somebody's not going to read this and get over the top, or not going to read this and think it's too dense or any of the. But for me, it was so perfectly balanced between the different narrative threads and between how he plays, every part here. Like, he has such mastery and such confidence in his craft that even when he's going through this slog, there's the moment with the butterflies on the bloody river, and you just think it's so. The imagery is just so beautiful and so tender, and then you have the comic relief with the engineers, and you have the comic relief of oh yeah, there's Gesler and Stormy and Truth, and you have the comic relief of Coltane punching Gesler and breaking his hand, and you have. It's just everything is where it should be. A little laugh here, a little laugh here, a little bit of emotion here, a trudging part here, and it's just it's like a master composer, It's almost like Chopin or Tchaikovsky, sort of putting a note here, putting this note here, putting a little bit of horn here. It really feels like that looking back at it. When you're in it, you're not really thinking about it, but it's so masterfully composed. All of the book, but especially this part, like I said in the original spoiler-free review, there's echoes of the Xenophon March of the 10,000, which was a ancient Greek mercenary that fought for the Persians, and uh, when anyway his boss died before he got there, so him and his 10,000 had to make a fighting retreat from modern day Iraq to the coast of Turkey to get back to Greece, and there's a lot of similarities between this and that, and between the Roman, like the Wiccans of the plains, hired by or press ganged even by the Malazan Empire, have huge echoes of. I mean, lots of armies used auxiliaries, but in the end of the Roman Empire, it's sort of a wink, wink, nod, nod that Malazan Empire seems on its last legs, because the Roman Empire, when it was bringing in auxiliaries or barbarians especially to be its generals, it meant that the end was nigh. So as a history nerd, that sort of speaks out to me too. But it's so well done, and the Coltane is such a masterfully used character, because he is barely in the book. Maybe not barely, but he's very, very sparingly used. If you go back and read it or go back and look at it, he's much, much less used than you would think from the emotional resonance his death has at the end. He's so sparingly used. You get a feel of him from how Dwika thinks about him, or Dwika sees him, or his few interactions, or how he interacts with Bolt, which makes you think of Coltane, because they're the same clan, and he's Coltane's uncle, but he's also his second in command, hired by Coltane. So there's that sort of brushing effect of when Bolt does something, you get an echo of that, of whatever he does. It makes you think a little bit that of Coltane. So it's a trick to fill out the character of Coltane without actually Coltane being there. A brilliant trick, not in any way cheap or anything, but it's something that I noticed that he's almost never in it. But he's used so brilliantly when he is in it, that when his death comes at the end, it breaks your heart. And it breaks your heart like 10,000 people die and all the soldiers die, and that's brutal. Dwika dies, and that's brutal. But there's something about Coltane and the nobility of his sacrifice. How he almost knew, he almost knew very early on that he was doomed, but he was going to do his duty. And you talk and you think about the noble savage trope and the savage civilized trope, but he has such a practical nobility and a practical heroism. As I said, he doesn't do massive feats of arms, even though he's obviously some kind of awesome general, an awesome fighter, but he doesn't do massive feat of arms. He just heroically does his duty when it would be easier not to. And that's a heroism that anybody could do. And I think that's why it resonates so much, because like you think of Aragorn, Aragorn's so cool, but none of us are ever going to be Aragorn. But we can all aspire to be called, except the death, the brutal death and torture. But the ability to heroically do what needs to be done is so well realized in this book. He's such a well-handled character, and I had such affection for him. I almost welled up when he died, and when you think he's dead, but then he's not dead, and then you think he's made it, but he's not made it, and then he's strung up on the cross to be crucified, and then he gets shot by the archer. It's just the whole thing. Like I said, it's a slow marching military story, but there's so many ups and downs emotionally that it's such a good book. Really, it's such a good book. I'm sorry if I'm just waffling. It seems to be, for somebody who has a book review channel, I often waffle. So I apologize for that, but it's such a great book. Leaps and bounds above the first one, which I loved, but he honed his craft between the two books, or at least he got his uh, teething pains out of the first one, because the second one is such a finely crafted book. I don't see any flaws. I can see why people don't like it. Don't get me wrong. I can see why people wouldn't appreciate the style it's written, or wouldn't appreciate the content, or it's not for them. I can completely understand. This isn't the kind of book that everybody likes. But for somebody who likes world building, somebody who likes rich story, somebody who likes to get invested in what they're reading, it's for me. It's definitely for me, and it's some of the best that I've ever written. I wish. Excuse me. It's best that I've ever read. Sorry, Steven, for stealing your credit. Anyway, thank you so much for stopping by. Thank you, Malazan fans. I hope that this did your book justice. I hope that you enjoyed this review. I hope I said something that you agreed with, or maybe that you hadn't thought about. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. So let me know if it spurred anything that you hadn't thought about, or let me know if there's something that you thought or noticed that I did, and I would love to hear it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I will be reading and reviewing the third one shortly. Until then, what else do you think I should read? Let me know down below. Thank you so much for stopping by. Take care.